The front door flew open before Jun-Kyung could reach it. Sunhi was already in the bedroom when he got upstairs, pulling clothes from the closet in fistfuls, dresses, shoes, jewelry, and dropping them into an open suitcase on the bed. She moved fast. Efficient. Like she had been rehearsing this for weeks. Maybe she had. Sunhi. His voice was low. Careful. What are you doing? She didn't stop. Didn't even look at him. Down the hall, in the nursery, one of the twins started to cry. Then the other. That thin, high sound of toddlers who didn't understand what was happening but could feel it, the way children always feel things before the adults admit them. Sunhi. He stepped into the room. Talk to me. She finally looked up. Her face was composed, almost startlingly so. No red eyes. No trembling lip. She had already made her peace with whatever she was about to say. I'm leaving, Jun-Kyung. He stood completely still. Leaving where? Leaving. She turned back to the suitcase. Hyun-Soo asked me to come with him to Singapore. I said yes. Hyun-Soo. The name landed like a fist. Hyun-Soo Park, 44 years old, recently divorced, with a hotel empire that stretched across Southeast Asia. Jun-Kyung had met him twice at business dinners. Smiled at the man. Shaken his hand. You're not serious. I am. We have daughters. He took a step forward, voice cracking. They're 2 years old. Sunhi, they're right down the hall. I know where they are. Then how he stopped. Swallowed. Started again. How do you pack a bag and walk out on them? How do you do that? She folded a blouse, set it neatly in the suitcase. They'll be fine. They have Rachael. In the nursery, the crying had gotten louder. He could hear Rachel's voice now, soft, low, that warm American accent moving through the sound like a hand through water. Hush, baby. Hush. I've got you. They need their mother, Jun-Kyung said. They need stability. Sunhi zipped the suitcase. Something you haven't been able to give us in over a year. There it was. He had known it was coming. He had felt it building the way you feel weather changing before the sky shifts, something heavy and inevitable pressing down. But knowing it was coming did nothing to soften it. 6 months ago, KJ Capital had started to bleed. Bad investments, a market turn nobody saw in time, and one business partner who had quietly been moving funds for 2 years before anyone noticed. By the time the lawyers got involved, half the company was already gone. The rest went in the restructuring. This house, was mortgaged against the business. Everything was connected. Everything was falling together. He had been trying to hold it. He had been trying so hard. I'm fixing it, he said. We have a plan. Give me 6 months. I gave you 6 months. Her voice was flat. Final. I stayed through the investigation. I stayed through the asset freeze. I stayed when your colleagues stopped calling and your friends disappeared. She picked up the suitcase. I've been patient, Jun-Kyung. But patience doesn't pay school fees. Patience doesn't keep this house. Love doesn't pay bills. He moved in front of the door. Please. He wasn't ashamed of the word. He didn't care how it sounded. Please don't do this to our daughters. Please don't do this to me. We can start over. We've done hard things before. You've done hard things, she said quietly. I married you because you were successful. I'm not built for this version of your life. He searched her face for something, a flicker, a hesitation, one crack in that composure. He found nothing. She stepped around him. He let her. He heard her heels on the stairs. Heard the front door open. Heard it close. The sound of it moved through the house like a pressure change. Down the hall, the twins were still crying. Rachael was still in there, doing what she had done every night for 2 years, holding the pieces together in that quiet, unhurried way she had. He stood in the empty bedroom for a long moment, looking at the open closet. Half the clothes gone. Hangers swinging on the rod. Then he walked to the nursery doorway and looked in. Rachael was sitting on the floor between the 2 cribs, one hand through each set of bars, one small hand in each of hers. Seo-Yun was already settling, her eyes going heavy. Seo-Jin was still hiccuping through the last of her tears, but watching Rachel's face with that absolute, unconditional trust that children give to people who have never once let them down. Rachel looked up. She saw his face. She didn't ask. She already knew. She just held his daughter's hands a little tighter. He turned and went downstairs. The next 8 months rewrote everything he thought he understood about his life. The house went first. Not a surprise, he had seen it coming, but knowing something is inevitable doesn't make standing in an empty driveway with 2 toddlers and a single hired car feel like anything other than what it was. An ending. A before and after line drawn in the concrete. He moved them into a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of Seoul he had never lived in. Narrow staircase. Thin walls. A kitchen where 2 adults couldn't stand side by side without touching. He had offered to end Rachel's contract that first week. Had sat down with her at the small kitchen table, the one he had bought secondhand the day they moved in, and told her straight, "I can't pay you. Not for months, maybe longer. You don't have to stay." She had looked at him across the table. 24 years old, this Chicago girl who had come to Seoul on a work visa and answered a job listing for a live-in position with a wealthy Korean family. She had been with them since Seo-Yun and Seo-Jin were 6 weeks old. Had learned enough Korean to read bedtime stories badly and make the twins laugh trying. "I'm not leaving, sir," she said. "Rachel. I'm not leaving them." She was calm. Simple. The same way she said everything. "I'm not staying for a paycheck. I haven't been staying for a paycheck for a long time." She stood up and went to start dinner. "Tell me what groceries we can afford this week." That was the end of the conversation. She stayed. And, because she stayed, he could work. He took the first job he was offered, logistics coordination for a mid-sized freight company. Long hours, poor pay, a commute that took 90 minutes each way on public transit. His former colleagues saw him once on the subway platform. He saw the moment of recognition in the man's eyes, followed immediately by the decision to look elsewhere. Jun-Kyung didn't stop walking. He took a second job on weekends, inventory at a warehouse near the port. His hands, which had signed contracts worth hundreds of millions of won, now spent Saturdays moving boxes. He came home tired in ways he hadn't known existed. Not just physically bone-tired in some deeper place, the kind of tired that makes a man question every choice that brought him to a moment. But he came home. And when he came home, there was always something warm on the stove. The twins were always bathed and fed and ready for the 10 minutes of chaos they exploded into the second they heard his key in the lock. Seo-Yun always ran first. Seo-Jin always arrived 2 seconds later at full volume. And Rachel was always somewhere in the background, not in the way, never demanding attention, but present. Steady. The kind of steady that a man only recognizes for what it is after everything unsteady has been ripped away. One night he came home past 10. He had miscounted something in the warehouse inventory and had to redo 3 hours of work. He was starving and tired, and the apartment staircase felt longer than it ever had. He pushed the door open. The twins were asleep. The apartment was quiet. Rachel was at the kitchen table under the single overhead light, a book open in front of her, a small pot of something still warm on the back burner. She looked up when he walked in. "There's rice, sir," she said. "And the soup's still hot." He sat down at the table. He hadn't even taken off his jacket. She got up without being asked and brought him a bowl. Set it in front of him. Sat back down with her book. He ate. They didn't speak for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the particular silence of 2 people who have stopped needing to fill space with words. "I don't know how to do this," he said eventually. Not to her, exactly. More to the room. More to the ceiling. She lowered the book. Looked at him. "You've been doing it," she said. "Every day." "Barely. Barely counts." He looked at her. She had a way of saying things not soft, not harsh, just direct in a way that somehow didn't feel like a challenge. Just truth, offered plainly. You didn't have to stay, he said. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She tilted her head slightly. In the light, there was something in her expression he couldn't fully read, something quiet and careful, like she was deciding how much of a thing to say. I stayed because this is where I'm supposed to be, sir, she said finally. I don't know how to explain it better than that. He looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then he looked back at his bowl. Thank you, Rachael. And Rachael, he called again. Jun-Kyung, not sir. She blushed a little, then opened her book again. Okay. Eat your soup before it gets cold. He almost smiled. For the first time in what felt like a very long time, he almost smiled. The freight company let him go on a Thursday in November. 14 positions cut. His name on the list. 2 weeks' notice, a handshake, and cold air when he stepped outside. He stood on the pavement for a long moment, hands in his pockets, watching buses pass. Then he walked to the subway and went home. He didn't tell Rachael that night. He came in, ate dinner, helped settle the twins, and sat alone in the kitchen until past midnight going through numbers on his phone, savings, what was owed, how long they could manage. The answer wasn't comfortable. He found a new job within 3 weeks. Delivery driving overnight shifts. It paid better than the freight job and left his days free. He had been quietly building something on the side, a small logistics consultancy, just him and a second-hand laptop and everything he knew from running KJ Capital before the collapse. He had 1 client. Then 2. It wasn't fast, but it was moving. The overnight shift meant leaving at 9 and getting back by 6 in the morning. Before he signed the contract, he sat across from Rachael at the kitchen table. The shift runs 9 to 6, he said. You'd be alone with them through the night. I know that's not. Jun-Kyung. She looked at him evenly. Take the job. I'm asking if it's too much. It's not. Take the job. He studied her face for a second. She wasn't being polite. She meant it. He signed the contract. She handled the nights without once making him feel the weight of it. When Seo-jin woke crying, Rachael was there. When Seo-yeon went through a stretch of refusing to sleep unless someone was close, Rachael stayed until she dropped off. In March, both twins came down with a stomach bug, and for 2 nights, she managed it completely alone, the mess, the crying, the revolving misery of sick toddlers, before Jun-Kyung rearranged his route to come home early. He walked in on the 3rd morning to find her asleep on the couch. Both twins were pressed against her, one tucked under each arm like they had claimed her in their sleep. He stood in the doorway and looked at that for longer than he meant to. Then he got a blanket from the hall closet and laid it over all 3 of them without making a sound. He was on the subway one evening when he ran into Choi Min-jae. They had built their careers in parallel, same circles, same industry events, same golf club before the collapse. Min-jae had been at Jun-Kyung's wedding, had held one of the twins at the hospital the day they were born. The man looked up from his phone on the platform, saw Jun-Kyung in his delivery uniform, and something passed through his face. Not cruelty, something worse. Pity quickly covered. Jun-Kyung. He said it like a question. Min-jae. A pause that lasted too long. How are you? Fine. Jun-Kyung held his gaze. Relaxed. Unhurried. You. Min-jae fumbled through a few sentences. The business was good. His wife was well. He had said, we should get together sometime, catch up properly. Sure, Jun-Kyung said. They both knew they wouldn't. The train came. Jun-Kyung got on. He found a seat, rested his head back, and closed his eyes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even particularly sad. He was just very clear, in a way he hadn't been before the collapse, about who people actually were when the conditions changed. He thought about Rachael on that couch with his daughters pressed against her sides. He thought, some people stay. Most people don't. That's all it is. He kept his eyes closed the rest of the ride. Spring came, and the consultancy kept growing. 3 clients, then 5, Then enough that he let the warehouse weekend job go and worked the consultancy full days alongside the overnight driving. The income was nowhere near what his life had once looked like, but it was consistent and it was his, and those two things mattered more than he'd expected. The apartment was different in warm weather. The windows stayed open. Rachael had started growing herbs on the kitchen windowsill, basil, mint, something she called a science experiment that he had privately decided was neither basil nor mint. The whole kitchen smelled different because of it. Better. One afternoon, he came back from a client meeting to find her on the living room floor with the twins and what appeared to be an ambitious cardboard construction that had recently failed. She was pressing two pieces back together, tape in one hand, a crease of concentration between her brows. The twins were on their knees beside her, very invested, contributing nothing structural. She looked up when he walked in. Something quick moved through her expression, unguarded, just for a second, and then she shifted to make room. "Sit," she said. "Hold this piece. Don't let it lean." He sat down on the floor beside her and held the cardboard. Their hands were close. Not touching. Just close enough that he was aware of it. "Is this a castle?" he asked. "It was," she said. She tore a piece of tape with her teeth, and he watched that for exactly half a second too long. "It's recovering." Seo-Yun patted the cardboard encouragingly. Seo-Jin picked up a scrap piece and tried to eat it. They built for the next 40 minutes, him holding, her taping, the twins providing enthusiastic supervision in their own toddler language, a running commentary of sounds and gestures, and the occasional very certain pointing. When it was done, it was lopsided and improbable, and the twins looked at it with complete satisfaction. Jun-Kyung looked at it too. "It's good," he said. Rachael tilted her head, examining it. "It's terrible." "It's good," he said again. She laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of her, and it did something to the air in the room. Seo-Yun climbed into his lap. Seo-Jin climbed into Rachael's. They sat on the floor in the late afternoon light, surrounded by cardboard scraps and the twins' quiet, satisfied wait, and Jun-Kyung looked across at Rachael, her head bent towards Seo-Jin, her hand moving slow circles on his daughter's back without thinking. The way she did everything that mattered, without ceremony, and something arrived in him. Not slowly. All at once. The way things do when they've been building in the dark for a long time and finally surface. He looked away before she caught him. Seo-Yun's fever broke 39.5 at 2 in the morning. It had started on Tuesday low grade, easy enough. By Thursday it had climbed and she was slow and glassy-eyed in a way that sat wrong in his chest. He had called the pediatrician that afternoon. "Monitor," they said. "Come in if it crosses 39.5. It crossed 39.5 while he was standing in the hallway outside her door, already awake, already listening. He pushed the door open. Rachael was already there. She was sitting on the edge of Seo-Yun's small bed in the dark, one hand on the child's forehead, phone to her ear. She hadn't come to wake him. She had assessed the situation and was already 2 steps into handling it. "Temperature is 39.8, she said quietly into the phone. Alert but slow. Started Tuesday." A pause. "Okay. We'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and looked at him. "Get dressed," she said. "I'll get her ready." He didn't ask questions. He got dressed. They were at the hospital in 18 minutes. Jun-Kyung drove. Rachael sat in the back with Seo-Yun in her lap, one hand smoothing the child's hair, keeping her awake, talking to her in that low, unhurried voice that both twins had responded to since they were days old. Bilateral ear infection. Aggressive enough for antibiotics, nothing more serious. The doctor was calm and thorough. Jun-Kyung sat in the plastic chair beside the examination table and breathed carefully while the relief worked through him in slow waves. Seo-Yun had decided she would only cooperate with the nurse if Rachael was the one answering questions. Rachael answered every one without being asked twice, one hand held out for Seo-Yun to hold onto while the nurse worked. On the drive home, Seo-Yun fell asleep against Rachael's chest in the back seat. At a red light, Jun-Kyung looked at them in the rearview mirror. His daughter's face was slack with exhausted sleep. Rachel's head was tipped slightly back, her eyes closed, still holding on even in her own exhaustion. She didn't just stay, he thought. That word stay wasn't big enough for what she had become to this family. He didn't have a word that was. Not in Korean. Not in any language he knew. The light turned green. He drove. She was 25 now. He was 34. The consultancy had its best month yet in September. He came home in the afternoon for the first time in what felt like years, sat down at the kitchen table and told her. No preamble. Just the number. She looked up from what she was doing. Seriously? Seriously. A smile broke across her face, wide, real, the kind that changed her whole expression. Jun-Kyung, it's a start, he said. But he was looking at her smile, and something in his chest was doing something he wasn't going to examine too carefully right now. That night, after the twins were down, they sat in the kitchen with the window open and the night air coming in, and he made tea the way he always did, 2 cups, no asking, and set hers in front of her. They talked easily. They always talked easily now. About the business, about the girls, about a documentary she had watched that he hadn't. Small things. The kind of conversation that doesn't need to go anywhere because the company's the point. Then she set her cup down and said, without looking up, do you ever think about what you want? Not the business. Just for yourself. He was quiet for a moment. I used to think I knew, he said. Then I lost everything and figured out most of what I wanted was actually just proof. That I'd made it. That I was somebody. He looked at his cup. Turns out that wasn't worth much. So, what do you want now? He looked up at her. Direct. Unhurried. The way he approached everything he was serious about. Stability, he said. Someone who doesn't leave when it gets hard. A pause. Something real. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a car passed. She held his gaze. Something moved through her expression, careful and considering, and something else beneath it that she didn't quite let all the way out. That doesn't sound like too much to ask, she said quietly. No, he said. It doesn't. He picked up his cup. She picked up hers. Neither of them said anything else. But the silence between them had changed. It had a different weight to it now, not uncomfortable. Not uncertain. Just full. The way silence gets when 2 people are both aware of the same thing and neither has said it yet. He wasn't in a rush. He knew what he felt. He knew it clearly, the way he knew everything that actually mattered, without noise, without doubt. He just needed to be sure she was ready to hear it. The year the twins turned 5, everything started moving differently. The consultancy landed its biggest contract yet, a mid-sized shipping firm that needed full logistical restructuring. It wasn't KJ Capital. It wasn't even close. But it was real, it was his, and it required him to hire 2 people for the first time since the collapse. He sat with that fact for a while the evening he signed the contract. Just sat with it. He told Rachael at the kitchen table. She listened to the full thing, the scope, the timeline, what it meant for cash flow over the next 8 months. She asked 2 questions, both practical, both exactly the right ones. Then she said, "You did that. We're a long way from where we were." "You did that," she said again. Not louder. Just firmer. He looked at her. She was looking back at him with that expression she had, open, direct, no performance in it, and something moved through him that he was done pretending wasn't there. He had been patient. He was a patient man by nature, and he had given himself time, given her time, let it build the way things that are real build slowly, without pressure, without announcement. But he had known since the night on the floor with the cardboard castle. He had known clearly, the way he knew everything that mattered. He just hadn't said it yet. Rachael. She tilted her head slightly. Waiting. I need to say something, and I'm going to say it plainly because that's the only way I know how. He set his cup down. I don't want to lose you. Not as someone who works here. Not as someone who stays out of care for the girls. I want you to stay because you want to be here. With me. He paused. I'm not asking you to answer right now. I just needed you to know I'm not confused about what I feel. The kitchen was very quiet. Rachael looked at him for a long moment. Her expression moved through something, not surprise exactly. More like someone who has been carrying a thing carefully for a long time and has just been told they're allowed to set it down. I'm not confused either, she said quietly. He held her gaze. No, the corner of her mouth moved. I've been here this whole time, Jun-Kyung. He almost smiled. I noticed. She laughed soft, a little undone, and looked down at the table. He watched her and didn't look away, because he was done looking away. So, he said. So, she said back. It wasn't a grand scene. There was no speech, no dramatic gesture. It was two people at a kitchen table at the end of a long day, finally saying out loud what had been true for a long time. That was all. That was everything. They moved carefully at first, the way people do when they don't want to break something that matters. A hand held on the walk back from the park with the girls. A conversation that lasted past midnight because neither of them wanted it to end. Small things that meant large things. The twins noticed immediately. Seo-yeon watched them with 5-year-old solemnity from across the dinner table one evening, eyes moving between the two of them. Are you and Auntie Rach getting married? She asked Jun-Kyung. Jun-Kyung looked at Rachael. Rachael looked at her rice. Why do you ask? Jun-Kyung said. Seo-yeon considered this carefully. Jimin at school said her dad and her new mom held hands, and then they got married. That's very observant of Jimin, Jun-Kyung said. Seo-jin, who had been eating with complete focus until this moment, looked up. She pointed at Rachael, then at Jun-Kyung, then made a gesture with her small hands that seemed to indicate the two of them together in some configuration that satisfied her. Rachael pressed her lips together. She was trying very hard not to laugh. Go back to your dinner, Jun-Kyung told them both. They went back to their dinner, apparently satisfied. Under the table, his hand found Rachael's. She turned her palm over and let him hold it, and he felt her trying not to smile even though he couldn't see her face. He proposed 6 months later. No restaurant. No audience. He did it the way he did everything that mattered, directly and only to her. They were on the small balcony after the girls were asleep, the city quiet below them, and he turned to her mid-conversation, reached into his jacket pocket, and held out the ring. She went still. I told you I was going to say things plainly, he said. So, will you marry me? It wasn't even really a question. It came out like a statement, like something he already knew the shape of and was simply placing in front of her. Rachael looked at the ring. Looked at him. Her eyes were bright. You're not even nervous, she said. I know what I want. Jun-Kyung. Rachael. She exhaled. Shook her head slowly, smiling in a way she couldn't stop. Yes, she said. Obviously yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. She looked down at it, and then up at him, and he kissed her once, quiet and sure, the way he did most things. Inside, through the glass door, everything was still and sleeping and safe. The wedding was small by design. Neither of them wanted a production. They chose a venue that held 40 people, close family, a few friends, the people who had actually shown up during the years when showing up had cost something. The kind of guest list that writes itself when you've been through what they had been through. Rachael's mother and 2 sisters flew in from Chicago 3 days before. They were warm and loud, and they loved the twins immediately and with total commitment, Seo-jin especially, who responded to their energy like she had been waiting her whole short life for this specific volume of affection. Jun-Kyung watched his daughters spin around 3 Chicago women in his living room and thought, this is what family is supposed to feel like. The ceremony itself was short. The vows were their own words, not borrowed ones. Rachael stood across from him in a dress that was simple and exactly her, soft fabric, quiet elegance, small white flowers braided into her hair, and said the things she had clearly thought carefully about, in that composed, unhurried way she had. Not shy, not performing, just honest. He said his without notes, looking only at her. Seo-yeon cried, which she would later deny. Seo-jin fell asleep in her chair during the reception and had to be carried to the car, which was extremely on-brand. That night, after everything, after everyone had gone, after the girls were down, Jun-Kyung sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Rachael across the room. She was taking the flowers out of her hair, looking into the small mirror on the dresser, and she caught his reflection looking at hers. "What?" she said. "Nothing." He meant it. Just this. She held his gaze in the mirror for a moment. Then she smiled, that real one, the one that changed her whole face, and went back to her hair. He didn't need to say more than that. He never did. The years that followed were not perfect. No years are. But they were good. Genuinely, increasingly, undeniably good. The consultancy didn't just recover, it grew past anything he had built before. The shipping firm restructuring became a case study that opened doors he hadn't knocked on. Within 2 years of the wedding, JK Logistics Consulting had a full staff, 3 regional clients, and a reputation in the industry that was built entirely on results. No inherited wealth. No borrowed credibility. Just the work. He moved them out of the apartment the year the twins turned 6. Not into something modest, not into something careful, into a house that sat on a quiet street in one of Seoul's better neighborhoods, with a garden in the back and enough space that the girls could run inside without him hearing every footstep. A proper kitchen. High ceilings. A study where he worked late and the light stayed on past midnight. It was larger than the house he had lost. Quieter too, and more deliberate, chosen rather than inherited, earned rather than assumed. That difference was not lost on him. Former colleagues started calling again. He took some of the meetings and declined others, and he made that distinction without ceremony or explanation. Min-jae, the man from the subway platform, reached out twice. Jun-Kyung replied politely and left it there. Some doors, once you've seen clearly what's on the other side, you don't need to reopen. The twins grew. Seo-yeon became serious and precise, with her father's directness and a loyalty that once given was absolute. Seo-jin became chaotic and creative and deeply attached to Rachael in a way she expressed by following her into every room and narrating everything she was doing at all times, which Rachael received with complete, unfailing patience. Rachael herself had gone back to school part-time, early childhood education, something she had wanted before Seoul and set aside. Jun-Kyung had said nothing except, do it. She had enrolled the following semester. She made the house a home the way she made everything without announcement, without asking for acknowledgement, through the daily accumulation of small things done with care. Meals and order and the particular warmth that a house has when the person at its center actually wants to be there. Jun-Kyung watched her sometimes the way he had that first afternoon on the living room floor, not hiding it anymore, not looking away, and felt something he had learned, through everything, to call by its actual name. Gratitude. And love. And the particular peace that comes from knowing that the person beside you is exactly where they chose to be. The girls were 7 now. Life was good. Better than good. Better, frankly, than it had ever been. It was, as these things go, exactly the moment before everything was interrupted. Sunhi came back on a Wednesday. Jun-Kyung was at the office. Rachael was home with the girls. It was a half day at school when the car pulled up outside. She saw it from the kitchen window. A car she didn't recognize, too clean, the kind that belonged to a certain tax bracket. She thought nothing of it. Then the door opened. She knew who it was before the woman had fully turned around. Sunhi was still beautiful. That was the first thing. The kind of beauty that money maintains and time had only sharpened. She was dressed well. Heels on the front path, A silk blouse, the kind of put together that was meant to make a statement before a word was spoken. But there was something around the edges. A tightness. A careful composure that was working just slightly too hard. She rang the bell. Rachael opened the door. They looked at each other. 7 years. Sunhi's eyes moved over her slower now than they ever had when Rachael was just the help, back when she barely warranted a full look. They moved over her face, her posture, and the house behind her, this house, large and warm and clearly lived in, and the specific, settled ease with which Rachael stood in the middle of it all. Sunhi knew exactly who she was. She had known her for years. That was what made her expression shift the way it did. Rachael, she said. The name came out clipped. Like a fact she didn't enjoy stating. Sunhi, Rachael said. A beat. I'm here to see Jun-Kyung. He's not home, Rachael said. Sunhi's eyes moved past her into the house again. Taking inventory. I'll wait. He'll be in touch, Rachael said. And held the door exactly where it was. Sunhi looked back at her. Something moved through her face, the beginning of the old authority, the reflexive reach for a dynamic that no longer existed. You're still here, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I live here, Rachael said simply. I'm his wife. The word landed. Sunhi stared at her. Not the polished stare she had walked up the path with. Something underneath it had cracked, something she hadn't prepared for, because some things you simply cannot prepare for no matter how many times you rehearse the visit on the plane home. His wife. She looked at Rachael the way she had never once looked at her in all the years she had lived in that house. Fully. Taking inventory. The specific way she stood in the doorway of a home that was warm and ordered and clearly, unmistakably hers. You, Sunhi stopped. When she started again her voice had an edge. You were the housekeeper. I was, Rachael said. And you think the composure slipped further. Something uglier surfaced. A maid. He married the maid. Rachael said nothing. She had learned a long time ago that not every provocation needed an answer. You played your little role while I was gone and now you think you're... Sunhi stepped forward, hand rising. Behind Rachael, small footsteps. Seo-yeon appeared at her side, pressed against her arm, and looked up at the woman in the doorway with her father's eyes, direct, measuring, giving nothing away for free. Sunhi's hand dropped. 7 years. Her daughter was 7 years old and standing in a hallway that smelled like home, leaning against another woman like it was the most natural thing in the world, and looking at her own mother with no recognition at all. Seo-yeon, Sunhi said. Her voice came out entirely different now. Smaller. Stripped of everything that had been in it a second ago. Seo-yeon looked at her for a moment. Then looked up at Rachael. Rachael put her hand on the child's shoulder. Go find your sister, baby. I'll be right in. Seo-yeon went. No argument. No lingering. Rachael looked back at Sunhi. Steady. Unhurried. I'll let Jun-Kyung know you came. And she closed the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment, hand still resting on it, keeping her breathing even. She was not shaken, not exactly. But she was human, and some things land no matter how settled you are. She heard Sunhi's heels on the path. Then the click of a car door. Then silence. She exhaled. Went back to the kitchen. Finished making lunch. Fed the girls. Let the afternoon be what it was. She told Jun-Kyung that evening when he came home. She waited until the girls were in bed, no reason to carry it through dinner, no reason to let it color the whole afternoon. When the house was quiet, she sat across from him at the kitchen table and told him plainly. Sunhi had come. What she said at the door. The way her hand had come up. Jun-Kyung listened without interrupting. His face didn't shift much, just that stillness he had when something mattered enough to receive fully before responding. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Did she touch you? No. He held her gaze. Checking. Satisfied with what he found. She won't do that again, he said. I know. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. She turned her palm over and held it. I keep thinking about what she expected to find, he said after a moment. I know. She expected to walk back into something broken. Rachael looked at him. Instead, she found this. He almost smiled. Instead, she found this. He repeated. Sunhi came back 2 days later. This time Jun-Kyung was home. He and Rachael both heard the knock. He opened the door. Sunhi had dressed carefully. That was the first thing. Not the composed armor of 2 days ago, something softer, more deliberate. The kind of effort that was meant to be noticed. She looked at Jun-Kyung and something warm moved through her expression, like a door she had decided to open. Jun-Kyung. His name in her mouth the way it used to be. Familiar. Easy. Like no time had passed at all. He looked at her and said nothing. She smiled, a little uncertain, a little hopeful, still banking on something she had decided was still there. Can we talk? Just, can I come in? Her eyes moved past him then and found Rachael standing in the hallway. The smile didn't disappear. It changed, calcified into something else entirely. She looked at Rachael the way she had always looked at the help, through her, slightly past her, the reflexive dismissal of someone who had never once considered that the woman in her kitchen was anything more than furniture. I'd like to speak with Jun-Kyung, she said. Politely. As though Rachael were still employed by her. Privately. Rachael said nothing. Jun-Kyung didn't move from the door. Sunhi looked back at him, recalibrating, softening again. I've missed you, she said. Simply. Like it was an offering. I know things are complicated. But I've been thinking about us. About what we had before everything fell apart. She paused. That doesn't just disappear, Jun-Kyung. The hallway was very quiet. Sunhi. His voice was even. There is no us. Something flickered in her face. She hadn't expected that tone. She had expected something else. Some remnant of the man who had been on his knees begging her to stay. Some evidence that 7 years hadn't been enough to close what she had opened when she walked out. She found nothing like that in his face. Her eyes cut to Rachael again. And this time the politeness was gone. Is this because of her? The warmth had left her voice entirely. Jun-Kyung, she was the housekeeper. She was hired help. You can't honestly tell me that she stopped. Looked at Rachael with open contempt. What did you do? What exactly did you say to him while I was gone? Rachael met her gaze. Steady. Unbothered. Nothing, she said quietly. I just stayed. Sunhi's jaw tightened. You took advantage. She took care of my daughters. Jun-Kyung's voice was flat. Final. She took care of this family. She stayed when she had every reason to leave. He looked at Sunhi directly. And you left when you had every reason to stay. Jun-Kyung. You came back expecting to find something that waited for you, he said. It didn't wait. I didn't wait. He said it without cruelty. Just cleanly. I built something real. With someone real. Sunhi stared at him. The entitlement was cracking now, something rawer underneath it, not remorse, not yet, just the shock of a woman who had miscalculated badly and was only now feeling the full weight of it. She turned to Rachael. All of it landed there, the wounded pride, the disbelief, everything she couldn't direct at him. You. Her voice dropped. You really think you replaced me? A maid? You're standing in my house, with my children. Her hand came up fast, aimed at Rachael. Jun-Kyung caught her wrist. One hand. Clean and immovable. Sunhi froze. The air on the doorstep went completely still. He looked at her. No anger. No heat. Something far colder and more final than either. Don't touch my wife, he said. 3 words. Quiet enough that they filled every inch of the silence. He released her wrist. She stood there, hand dropping, something cracking open behind her eyes, the full weight of it arriving all at once. What she had left. What she had come back to find. What she had just done on the doorstep of it. Jun-Kyung. You walked away from this family. He stepped fully in front of Rachael. Not a performance. Just where he stood. You don't get to come back and destroy it. Sunhi looked at him, then at Rachael behind him, who had not flinched, who stood with the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who knows exactly where she is and exactly who she is in this house. Sunhi walked away, down the path, to her car, and gone. Jun-Kyung closed the door. The house was quiet around them. He turned to Rachael. She was looking at him, steady, her eyes bright with something she was holding carefully. "Are you okay?" he said. She exhaled. "Yes." He looked at her for a moment. Then he reached out and tucked a loose piece of her hair back, and his hand stayed at the side of her face, and she covered it with her own. They stood like that in the hallway of their home. Down the hall, the twins' voices drifted from somewhere in the back of the house, Seo-jin at full volume about something, Seo-yeon responding in that measured way she had. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a family that was whole and unhurried and completely, unmistakably itself. Jun-Kyung looked at Rachael. She looked back at him. No words needed. They had never needed many. He dropped his hand. She kept hold of it. They walked back into the kitchen together. The door closed behind them. That was the day it became undeniable, not to them, they had known for years, but to anyone paying attention. The woman who had left came back and found a life so full there was no space left for her grief to land. And the woman who stayed. She had become the home he never lost. If this story moved you, if you've ever stayed when it would have been easier to leave, or loved someone quietly and without condition until they finally saw it, drop a comment. Tell me what this story meant to you, and if you want more stories like this one, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and come back every week. There's always another story worth telling. Thank you for watching.